Cold morning light filtered through the narrow windows of the base hallway, spreading across the polished floor like a thin sheet of silver. Daniel Lockhart pushed his mop forward, muscles moving on autopilot, his mind drifting somewhere between exhaustion and routine. He had learned to live inside these quiet hours, the time before the trainees marched, before officers filled the corridors, before the world demanded anything from him. For a single dad, quiet was a gift. He glanced at the cheap digital watch on his wrist. 1 minute before she would appear over the last several weeks, that minute had become something else, something he didn't have a name for, something heavy but familiar, like déjà vu mixed with concern. At exactly 5:40, her silhouette emerged around the far corner. The young soldier walked slowly, shoulders stiff with fatigue, boots dragging slightly against the floor. She wore her uniform like a battlefield, creased, dulled, marked by sleepless nights. A baby was strapped to her chest in a faded gray carrier, cheek resting on her collarbone, tiny fingers curling gently in the fabric of her uniform. Every morning she looked exhausted. This morning, she looked worse. Morning, she murmured, her voice was soft, a whisper touched by strain, as if she'd spent the night fighting something no one else could see. Morning, Daniel said, leaning on his mop handle. Long night? Longest one yet, she breathed. She tried smiling. It didn't quite reach her eyes. Daniel studied her quietly. She was too young to look so tired. Too thin to carry the weight she clearly bore. Too isolated for someone raising an infant alone. But she never complained. Not once. Even when her knees trembled while she stood. Even when her hands shook as she adjusted the baby's blanket. Even when her eyes glistened with exhaustion she refused to name. Want to sit for a second? Daniel asked. The soldier shook her head. I'm okay. Just balancing life on duct tape and caffeine. Been there, he replied. The baby stirred, making a small unhappy noise. Daniel's expression softened. He remembered those early years with Lily, the sleepless nights, the fear of doing everything wrong, the crushing loneliness after his wife died. But he also remembered how a child could give someone a reason to keep breathing. You know, he said quietly, you don't have to do this alone. Her lips parted as if she wanted to answer, but she didn't. Instead, she looked away, her expression tightening. Something in that reaction told Daniel the truth. She already was alone, just like he once had been. He was about to say more, something small, something human, when her hand went to the wall. Her fingers dragged weakly across the surface. You okay? Daniel asked sharply. She nodded, but her eyes were foggy. Her breaths were shallow. A cold shine of sweat covered her forehead. She took one step forward and stumbled. Daniel moved instantly. He dropped the mop. He reached out. But she lifted a trembling hand, as if asking him to wait. As if refusing help was the last bit of control she had. Then her knees buckled. The baby let out a startled cry. Daniel caught the soldier before she hit the ground, one arm securing the baby, the other wrapping around her shoulders. Hey, hey. His voice cracked with urgency. Stay with me. Her head fell against his chest. Her eyes rolled back. Her body went limp, like someone had pulled the last thread holding her together. Help! Daniel shouted. His voice echoed across the hallway. Somebody get medical. But no one came. Trainees wouldn't start arriving for another 10 minutes. The hallways were empty. The base was asleep. He looked down at her, pale, unconscious, barely breathing, and something fierce rose in him. He'd felt this once before, years ago, when Lily stopped breathing during a fever. That same raw instinct, that same fear, that same feeling of being thrown into a moment larger than himself. He adjusted the baby against his chest and lifted the soldier into his arms. She was too light. Much too light. I've got you, Daniel murmured, breath trembling. I won't let anything happen to you. The baby's tiny fingers gripped his shirt like a plea. Daniel hurried through the corridor, boots splashing through remnants of cleaning water. His heart pounded in his ears as he reached the infirmary doors and kicked them open with his shoulder. A nurse looked up, startled. What happened? She collapsed, Daniel said, breathless. She hasn't been eating, hasn't been sleeping. She's been pushing herself too hard. Put her here, the nurse instructed. Daniel laid the soldier gently on a bed, but the baby clung so tightly to him the nurse hesitated. He won't let go, Daniel said gently. Then hold him, the nurse replied. We need to focus on stabilizing her. He stayed by her side while they placed an oxygen mask on her, checked her vitals, started 4 fluids. Medical jargon filled the air, but the words that hit Daniel hardest were the whispered ones: she's severely dehydrated. Burning herself out. Running on fumes. He stood there, helpless, worried, heart aching for a woman he barely knew. With the baby quieted, pressing his face into Daniel's shirt, soothed by the steady rhythm of Daniel's heartbeat. As the nurses stepped away for equipment, one turned to him. "Do you know her name?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "She never told me." The nurse sighed. "Someone will come looking for her. Soldiers like her, they're never truly alone." But Daniel wasn't convinced. The soldier always moved like a ghost, unseen, unnoticed, unrecognizable. There was no ring on her finger. No friends who greeted her. No one she ever met except him. He looked at her unconscious form, pale lips, cracked knuckles, the faint tremor still in her hands, and wondered what kind of life forced someone to keep moving until they collapsed. The baby whimpered. Daniel rocked lightly, instinctively, like he used to when Lily cried. The nurse watched him and softened. "You're good with him," she said. "I've had practice," he murmured. 7 years worth. Single father? He nodded. That explains the calm. Calm? He felt anything but calm. He felt protective. 10 times more than he ever expected to feel for someone he barely knew. The soldier breathed shallowly, her chest rising and falling under the blanket the nurses draped over her. She looked so young. Too young to carry the world on her shoulders. Daniel tightened his hold on the baby and whispered, "Your mom's going to be okay." He hoped it was true, and then, the world shifted. The infirmary doors slammed open with a force that rattled the glass. A tall officer stepped in, then another, their posture was rigid. Their expressions tense, and then he appeared. A man whose presence filled the room the way thunder fills a storm, uniform flawless. Metal shining. Shoulders broad, posture unyielding. His hair was steel gray, his eyes sharp enough to silence an entire battalion. Authority radiated from him like heat. Daniel recognized him instantly. Admiral Jonathan Hale, not just a high-ranking officer, not just respected, not just feared. Legend stories of his operations were whispered like myths. Men who had fought beside him spoke of leadership carved from iron. Every officer on the base snapped to attention the moment he breathed, but right now, he wasn't a legend, he was a father. "Where is she?" the admiral thundered, voice cracking like a whip. The nurse stepped forward. "Sir, she's right." The admiral didn't wait. He stormed through the room, eyes blazing with fear and fury, and when he reached the bed, when he saw her unconscious, pale, still, everything inside him broke. His knees nearly buckled. "Sweetheart," he whispered, voice trembling with raw fear. "No, no, no, no." His hand hovered over her forehead before he finally touched her, fingers shaking. Daniel froze. He wasn't watching an admiral, he was watching a father terrified of losing his child. The admiral swallowed hard, eyes reddening, and whispered her name, a name Daniel had never heard. His daughter, the silent, exhausted soldier he'd helped every morning, was the daughter of the most powerful man on the entire base. The weight of that revelation crashed into Daniel's chest, and then the admiral turned, his gaze locking onto Daniel, the janitor holding his daughter's baby. The room went still, a breathless, uncertain. Daniel tightened his grip on the child instinctively. The admiral's eyes narrowed, emotions swirling: fear, anger, confusion, gratitude, protectiveness, the kind of storm a single word could set loose. Finally, the admiral stepped closer, voice low, controlled, but trembling beneath the surface. "Who," he asked, "are you?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. He wasn't sure himself. A janitor, a father, a man who stepped in when no one else did, and now, he was standing in the middle of a storm that would change everything.